The silverware clinked against china plates, but the sound felt distant, like I was underwater. My parents sat at the head of the table, beaming at my brother David as he recounted his latest promotion. Third one this year, apparently. I picked at my mashed potatoes the same way I'd been picking at my self-worth for the past 35 years. And the board specifically mentioned my innovative approach, David said, chest puffed out like a peacock. They said I'm exactly the kind of forward-thinking leader the company needs. Mom clasped her hands together, eyes glistening. Oh, David, we're so proud. Aren't we proud, honey? She nudged Dad, who nodded enthusiastically. Very proud. That's our boy. Ivy League education really pays off, doesn't it? I took a sip of water, trying to wash down the familiar taste of invisibility. 12 years. For 12 years, I'd been sending $2,000 home every single month. $24,000 a year. $288,000 total. Not that anyone was counting, except me. I was always counting. Rebecca, you're quiet tonight, Mom said, finally acknowledging my presence. How's your little job going? My little job. I was a senior financial analyst at a respected firm, but somehow it always became little when compared to David's corporate ladder climbing. It's fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Actually, I just led a team that— That's nice, dear, Dad interrupted in turning back to David. Son, tell us more about that conference in Dubai. Must have been something. David launched into another story, and I felt myself shrinking. Again, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you know this feeling. That hollow ache in your chest that says you'll never be enough, no matter what you do. Hit subscribe if you want to see how this story ends, because I promise, by the time we're done, you'll understand how I turned years of being underestimated into the most powerful comeback of my life. According to recent research, 27% of Americans have cut off contact with at least one family member. 52% say money is the biggest negative factor affecting their mental health. I was about to become both statistics. You know what your brother's secret is? Dad said, pointing his fork at David. He's got that killer instinct, that drive. Not everyone has it. Mom nodded. Some people are just born with it. David's always been special. Remember when he was in Little League? Natural athlete, natural leader. My hands clenched under the table. I'd paid for 3 years of David's leadership seminars. I'd covered the down payment on his condo when he was between opportunities. I'd wired money for Dad's back surgery, Mom's dental work, even their 20th anniversary cruise to Alaska. Rebecca's different, Mom continued, and my stomach tightened. She's more practical, steady. Not everyone can be a star, and that's okay. The words hung in the air like a slap that hadn't quite landed yet. David chuckled, that same condescending sound I'd heard my entire childhood. Come on, Mom, don't be so hard on her. Rebecca does her best. It's not her fault she doesn't have the same ambition. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Something inside me cracked, like ice giving way under too much pressure. Dad laughed too. He's right, Rebecca. You'll never be as good as your brother, but you don't have to be. You've got your own path. Simple, stable, safe. Nothing wrong with that. The room tilted. 12 years of silence. 12 years of checks written and wire transfers sent. 12 years of putting everyone else first while I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and drove a 10-year-old Honda. 12 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never asked for anything in return. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, loud enough that everyone stopped mid-laugh. Then tell him to pay all the bills. Silence crashed over the table like a wave. "What?" David's smile faltered. "I said," I repeated, my voice steady now, clear as crystal. "Tell him to pay all the bills. Since he's so ambitious and successful, he can take over the mortgage payments, the insurance, the medical bills, the car repairs, the property taxes, all of it." Mom's face went pale. "Rebecca, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the $2,000 I send home every month. The $2,000 I've sent every single month for the past 12 years. I'm not sending money anymore." Dad's fork clattered onto his plate. "You're being dramatic. This is a family dinner, not the time for—" "I'm being dramatic," my voice rose. "I've been paying your bills for over a decade, and I'm being dramatic." Mom stood up, her hand pressed against her chest. "What money? We never received a single dollar from you." The room spun. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign that she was joking, that this was some cruel prank. But her confusion looked genuine, completely, devastatingly genuine. "What do you mean you never received it?" My voice came out as a whisper. "I've been transferring money into Dad's account since I was 23, every single month." David shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in his wine glass. That night, I didn't cry. I went home, opened my laptop, and pulled up 12 years of bank statements. There it was, line after line, transfer to James Thompson, $2,000. Sometimes more when there were emergencies, a broken water heater, a roof repair. That time Mom's car died and she needed a new one. $288,000. Gone. But apparently never received. I started printing. The printer spit out page after page of evidence, the mechanical whir filling my empty apartment. While it printed, I dug through old emails. "Dad, got the transfer for Mom's surgery. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Don't know what we'd do without you." "Rebecca, can you help with the property tax this quarter? It's higher than expected." "Emergency, furnace broke. Can you wire money today?" Every email was there, saved, time-stamped, undeniable. I created a folder on my desktop and started taking screenshots of everything. Years of text messages, payment confirmations, thank you notes that acknowledged money received. How could they say they never got it, unless they didn't, unless someone else did? I logged into the bank account Dad had set up years ago, the one he'd asked me to use for family expenses. My fingers trembled as I navigated through the account history. The deposits were there, every single one, but the withdrawals. My stomach dropped. The money wasn't going to household bills. It was being transferred immediately, within hours, sometimes minutes, to another account, an account belonging to David Thompson. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen, the only light in my dark apartment. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls seemed to close in. David had been taking my money. For 12 years, every dollar I'd sent home, thinking I was helping my parents, had actually been funneled directly to my brother. And somehow my parents genuinely believed I'd never contributed anything. This wasn't just financial theft. This was gaslighting on a spectacular scale. This was my entire family structure, built on a lie so massive I couldn't see the edges of it. I pulled up David's social media profiles. There was his house, the one he'd bought 5 years ago, the one he'd bragged about at dinner. "All me," he'd said, "saved every penny." I zoomed in on the photos, custom kitchen, hardwood floors, that renovation he'd posted about last summer, all paid for with my money my parents thought he'd earned through his ambition and drive, money that was supposed to be keeping them afloat. But wait, if the money wasn't going to my parents, How were they actually paying their bills? I called my mom's sister, Aunt Sarah, the only family member who'd ever seemed to see me clearly. She answered on the third ring. "Rebecca, it's late, honey. Everything okay?" "Aunt Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. How are my parents actually managing financially?" There was a long pause. "What do you mean? I mean, are they struggling? Do they need help with bills?" Another pause, longer this time. "Rebecca, your father has a full pension from his 30 years at the power company. Your mother has her teacher's retirement. They own the house outright, paid it off 6 years ago. They're doing fine. Better than fine, actually. They just took that Mediterranean cruise last month." The room tilted again. "They told me they had a mortgage. Dad said the property taxes were killing them." "Honey," Aunt Sarah's voice softened. "There hasn't been a mortgage on that house in years. What's going on?" I told her everything. The years of transfers, tonight's dinner, Mom's shocked face when I mentioned the money, David's sudden interest in his wine. When I finished, Aunt Sarah was quiet. For so long I thought the call had dropped. "That son of a bitch," she finally whispered. "Rebecca, I knew David was manipulative, but this is something else. This is fraud. Mom and Dad really don't know?" "If they don't, then David's been forging documents, lying to everyone, and playing you all against each other. And if they do know," she trailed off. "Either way, this is bad. This is really bad." We talked for another hour. Aunt Sarah told me things I'd never known. How David had borrowed money from her 5 years ago and never paid it back. How he'd tried to get her to invest in his business ventures that never materialized. How she'd warned my parents multiple times that something wasn't right with him, but they'd dismissed her concerns. "He's the golden child," she said bitterly. "Always has been. They can't see him clearly. But Rebecca, you need to protect yourself. This isn't just family drama, this is a crime." After we hung up, I kept digging. I found more accounts, more transfers. I discovered that David had added himself as a joint account holder on the account Dad had set up, something he'd apparently done without telling anyone. That gave him legal access to withdraw the funds, but it didn't make it right. Not when I'd been sending money under false pretenses. I found the group chat. Real Family, it was called. Dad, Mom, and David. Not me, never me. The messages went back years. I scrolled through, my heart pounding harder with each revelation. David: "She'll send more if you tell her the roof needs work." Dad: "Feels wrong to keep asking." David: "She wants to help. Let her feel useful." Mom: "But shouldn't we tell her where it's actually going?" David: "And ruin the surprise? I'm building us all a future. Trust me." There were dozens of messages like this, hundreds. My parents did know. They knew exactly where the money was going. They were actively participating in the deception, helping David extract more and more from me. The surprise he'd mentioned? He was supposedly building a family investment portfolio that would benefit everyone. Except when I checked public records, there was no investment portfolio. There was just David's house, David's car, David's lifestyle, all funded by me, while my parents convinced me they were struggling. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every transfer, every lie. I backed it all up to the cloud, saved it on 3 different drives, and emailed copies to myself. By 3 a.m., I had built an airtight case, not just evidence of theft, but evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and 12 years of systematic manipulation. The golden child had been running a con, and his parents were willing accomplices. But I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't call David or my parents in a rage. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. For 12 years, I'd been trapped in a role: the dependable daughter, the family safety net, the one who gave and gave without question. I'd been so busy trying to earn love that I hadn't noticed I was buying it. And what I'd bought wasn't love at all. It was exploitation wrapped in family obligation. I opened a new document and started making a plan. Not a revenge plan, not yet. First, I needed to understand the full scope of what had been done. Then I needed to protect myself. And then, only then, would I decide what justice looked like. I called a forensic accountant first thing Monday morning. Her name was Patricia, and she specialized in financial fraud cases. When I laid out the situation, she listened without interruption, taking notes. "This is textbook embezzlement," she said when I finished. "The fact that you were sending money based on false information, that makes it fraud. The fact that your brother used his position as joint account holder to redirect funds you intended for your parents, that's theft. And the fact that they all knew and actively participated, that's conspiracy." "Can I get the money back?" I asked. "Potentially, but more importantly, do you want to press charges? Because what they did isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal." I thought about that. My family, criminal charges. It seemed impossible and yet completely obvious at the same time. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I want to know all my options." Patricia spent 3 weeks analyzing everything I'd given her. She traced every dollar, built a timeline, and identified patterns I'd missed. She discovered that David had also forged my signature on several documents: loan applications where he'd listed me as a co-signer without my knowledge, a lease agreement for his office space. "Rebecca," she said during our final meeting, her face serious, "what he's done to you is extensive. We're not talking about a one-time mistake or a family misunderstanding. This is a sophisticated, long-term fraud operation. Your brother has been using your identity and your money to build his entire life." The number on the page in front of me was staggering. With interest and damages, David owed me over $350,000. "What do you want to do?" Patricia asked. I looked at the evidence: pounds of paper, hundreds of hours of analysis, 12 years of my life, reduced to numbers and timelines. I thought about the dinner table, David's condescending laugh, my parents' dismissal, that crushing realization that I'd been invisible because they wanted me to be. "I want justice," I said, "but I want it to be public. I want everyone to see the truth." Patricia smiled, not a happy smile, but an approving one. "Then we need to be strategic. You can't just confront them. You need the timing to be perfect, the setting to be public enough that they can't lie their way out of it, and the evidence to be so overwhelming they can't deny it." "I think I know exactly when and where," I said. The family reunion was 2 months away. It was David's year to host, and he'd been planning it for months. Aunt Sarah had told me he'd arranged to receive some kind of family achievement award, outstanding son, or something equally ridiculous. The whole extended family would be there: cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, at least 50 people. Perfect. I spent those 2 months preparing. I hired a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in financial crimes. His name was Marcus Chen, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. "If you do this publicly, there's no going back," he warned. "Your relationship with your family will be permanently destroyed. Are you ready for that?" "There's no relationship to destroy," I said. "There never was. There was only exploitation disguised as family. I also started therapy, not just for processing the betrayal, but for learning how to set boundaries, how to recognize manipulation, how to trust myself again. My therapist, Dr. Wilson, had specialized in family trauma for 20 years. What you're describing is classic narcissistic family dynamics, she explained. The golden child and the scapegoat. David gets all the praise and none of the responsibility. You get all the responsibility and none of the praise. It's a system designed to keep everyone in their assigned roles. But why would my parents do that? Why would they participate in stealing from me? Because David gives them something you don't. Reflected glory. His success makes them feel successful, even if it's built on your sacrifice. Your competence threatens the narrative that David is special. So they minimize your achievements and maximize his, even when they know it's not real. Understanding the psychology helped, but it didn't make it hurt less. I still woke up some mornings feeling like maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe I should just forgive and forget. Those mornings I'd pull up the evidence, the screenshots, the bank statements, the messages where they planned their next request for money, the forged signatures. No, I wasn't being dramatic. I was being reasonable. I was finally, after 35 years, putting myself first. The day of the family reunion arrived. I dressed carefully, professional but not threatening. I'd learned from Patricia that presentation mattered. I brought 3 identical folders, each containing copies of the evidence. One for my parents, one for David, and one for anyone else who wanted to see the truth. I also brought a backup plan. Marcus had arranged for the local sheriff's department to be on standby. If things went south, if anyone tried to destroy evidence or become physical, help would be minutes away. Aunt Sarah was my inside person. She'd helped me set up a small projector in the main room, hidden behind some decorations. No one questioned it. They thought it was for David's award ceremony. I arrived late after everyone had gathered. The house was packed, family members I hadn't seen in years, all there to celebrate David, the golden child getting his crown. I found a spot near the back and waited. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were sweating. Dr. Wilson had warned me about this, the adrenaline, the fear, the urge to run. That's your body trying to protect you from conflict, she'd said, but sometimes conflict is necessary for healing. David took the podium around 7 p.m. Someone had actually built a small podium for a family reunion. The narcissism was almost impressive. I want to thank everyone for being here, David began, his voice dripping with false humility. This award means everything to me because family means everything to me. I know I'm successful, but I didn't get here alone. My parents raised me right, taught me values, showed me what it means to be a man of integrity. A man of integrity. The words were so absurd, I almost laughed. He continued, talking about sacrifice and hard work, about the importance of family support and staying true to your values. Every word was a lie, delivered with perfect conviction. The family ate it up, nodding along, some dabbing at their eyes. I looked at my parents. Mom was beaming, tears streaming down her face. Dad had his arm around her, both of them glowing with pride. Pride in the son who'd stolen from their daughter for over a decade. And finally, David said, I want to dedicate this award to my sister Rebecca. He scanned the crowd, found me in the back. Rebecca, come up here. Every head turned. I felt 50 pairs of eyes lock onto me. This wasn't part of his planned speech. This was improvisation. This was him trying to make himself Look magnanimous by publicly acknowledging me. I stood up. Actually, David, I said, my voice cutting through the room. Before I come up there, I have a question. His smile flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. Sure. What's up, sis? Can you explain where you got the down payment for your house? The room went quiet. David's smile turned confused. What? That's kind of a weird question because I have $288,000 in bank transfers that say I paid for it. The silence deepened. Someone's phone buzzed, unnaturally loud. Aunt Sarah stood up from her spot near the projector and turned it on. The screen lit up behind David, 6 feet of undeniable evidence. The first slide showed 12 years of bank transfers. My name, David's account. $2,000 per month, like clockwork. David's face drained of color. This isn't what it looks like. Really? I walked toward the front, folder in hand. Because it looks like systematic theft. It looks like you used a joint account Dad set up to intercept money I was sending home to help our parents, money they apparently never needed, because Dad has a full pension and Mom has her retirement, and they paid off the house 6 years ago. Mom stood up, her hand over her mouth. Rebecca, this isn't the time. Mom, did you or did you not tell me 3 months ago that you never received a single dollar from me? She opened her mouth, closed it. The entire family was watching, phones out now, some recording. I clicked to the next slide, screenshots of the real family group chat. This is from November of last year, I read aloud. She'll send more if you tell her the roof needs work. That's David. Feels wrong to keep asking. That's Dad. She wants to feel useful. David again. Gasps rippled through the room. I clicked through more slides, forged signatures, loan applications I'd never signed. A paper trail so clear a child could follow it. David didn't just take my money, I said, my voice steady now. He stole my identity, forged my signature, and used me as a personal ATM for 12 years, while convincing our parents that he was some kind of financial genius, and they helped him do it. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I was building an investment portfolio for all of us. It was supposed to be a surprise. Where is it? I asked. Where's this investment portfolio? He didn't answer. There is no portfolio, I continued. There's just your house, your car, your lifestyle, all funded by me. All while you and Mom and Dad sat at dinner tables calling me unambitious, telling me I'd never be as good as you. I turned to face my parents. Mom was crying, real tears now, but I couldn't tell if they were shame or just getting caught. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Did you know? Someone asked from the crowd. Cousin Mike, who I'd always liked. Did you know he was taking her money? The room waited for their answer. Mom's voice came out small. We thought, David said he was investing it. For everyone, for the family. For 12 years? Aunt Sarah's voice cut through. You thought for 12 years he was investing it and never once asked to see the returns. Never once wondered why Rebecca thought you were struggling when you weren't? No answer. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a letter from the forensic accountant, co-signed by my lawyer. This is a formal notification that I'm pursuing full restitution of $350,000, plus damages, plus legal fees. I've also filed a police report for identity theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The trophy in David's hands, the Outstanding Son Award, slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. You're going to press charges? Dad's voice shook. Against your own family? You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth less than David's ego, I said. You made me invisible for 35 years. Well, congratulations. Everyone finally sees the truth. I turned to leave, but Aunt Sarah grabbed my arm. Wait, she faced the room. Anyone else here want to share their David stories? Because I know I'm not the only one. Slowly, hesitantly, Cousin Mike raised his hand. He borrowed $30,000 from me 4 years ago. Never paid it back. Said he'd invest it for me. I never saw a dime. Aunt Karen stood up. 15,000, same story. 3 more family members came forward. Same pattern, same lies, same golden child weaponizing family loyalty. By the end of the night, David's total debts to family members exceeded $500,000. All of it borrowed, with promises of investment returns that never materialized. All of it enabled by parents who refused to see their son clearly. The reunion ended in chaos. Some family members yelled at David and my parents. Others tried to defend them. It's complicated, we shouldn't judge. Those were the ones who'd never been scapegoats, who'd never had to earn scraps of approval while watching someone else feast on praise they didn't deserve. I left with Aunt Sarah, Cousin Mike, and a handful of others who'd lived their own versions of invisibility. We went to a diner and talked until 2 a.m., swapping stories, validating each other's pain, planning our paths forward. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not as a supporting character in David's story, but as the protagonist of my own. The next morning, my phone exploded. Texts, calls, voicemails. Mom and Dad wanted to talk. David wanted to explain. Flying monkeys, distant cousins, family friends, wanted me to reconsider, to think about family, to not tear everyone apart. I blocked them all, every single one. Instead, I forwarded everything to my lawyer and focused on the only person whose opinion mattered, mine. The legal process took 8 months. David hired a lawyer who tried every trick to dismiss the charges. It was a family matter, not a legal one. I'd given the money willingly. There was no proof of intent to defraud. But Patricia's evidence was bulletproof, and Marcus was relentless. In the end, David pleaded guilty. The alternative was a trial that would publicly destroy what remained of his reputation. And his lawyer convinced him that a plea deal was his best option. The terms: full restitution of $288,000 plus 15% interest, payment plan of $3,000 per month for 8 years, probation instead of jail time, contingent on making every payment. One missed payment, and the jail sentence would be reinstated. My parents were forced to contribute. Their precious Mediterranean cruises and anniversary trips dried up as they refinanced their paid-off house to help David make restitution. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were finally struggling financially, but this time it was real. But more than the money, David got something he couldn't buy his way out of: a criminal record. Every background check for the rest of his life would show his fraud conviction. Every job interview, every date who Googled him, every professional opportunity, all tainted by the truth that he'd built his life on stolen money and forged documents. The first payment arrived in my account on September 15th, $3,000. I stared at it for a long time, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Not happiness exactly, more like closure, like a chapter ending that should have ended years ago. I used the money to pay off my own mortgage, the house I'd lived in for 6 years, scraping by while sending money home. It was finally truly mine. No more payments, no more living small so others could live large. The rest went into investments. Real investments, managed by a professional who had no familial obligation to lie to me. I opened a retirement account, built an emergency fund, started saving for things I'd always wanted but never prioritized: travel, education, experiences. For the first time in my adult life, my money was mine. All of it. No one calling at 2 a.m. with emergencies that weren't emergencies. No one guilting me into one more transfer, one more sacrifice, one more year of putting everyone else first. I kept the no-contact boundary firm. My parents tried to apologize 6 months after the settlement. They sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages of excuses and justifications wrapped in, "We're sorry you felt hurt." I didn't respond. Dr. Wilson and I had talked about this. The non-apology apology, the kind that takes no real responsibility. "We're sorry you felt hurt" is not the same as "we're sorry we hurt you." One places blame on your reaction, the other acknowledges their action. They never sent another letter. David tried too, once. An email that started with, "I know you'll never forgive me, but..." I deleted it without reading past the first sentence. Whatever explanation he thought would make a difference, I didn't need to hear it. His payments continued like clockwork, though. Court-ordered direct deposits from his account to mine every month. A permanent reminder of what it cost him to underestimate me. A year after the reunion, I started writing, not for publication, just for me. I documented everything: the manipulation, the revelation, the legal battle, the aftermath. Writing it down helped me process it, helped me see patterns I'd missed while living through it. But then Aunt Sarah suggested I share it anonymously on a blog focused on family financial abuse. "Someone else needs to hear this," she said. "Someone else is living this right now and thinks they're crazy." I posted it on a Thursday night, not expecting much. By Monday, it had 3,000 views. By the end of the month, 30,000. The comments section became a support group. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories of being financial scapegoats, invisible providers, exploited caregivers. "I thought I was the only one," someone wrote. "My brother did the same thing." "This is my life right now," another said. "But I didn't know it was fraud. I thought it was just family." The blog grew. I started researching financial abuse in families, interviewing experts, sharing resources. It became bigger than my story. It became a movement of people reclaiming their worth, setting boundaries, refusing to be ATMs for manipulative relatives. 2 years after that dinner table confrontation, my life looked completely different. I'd been promoted to director at my firm, leading a team of 12 analysts. My little job was now 6 figures with performance bonuses and respect from colleagues who valued competence over family connections. I'd started dating too, cautiously at first, terrified of being exploited again. But Marcus, who I met at a support group for adult children of narcissists, understood boundaries in a way that felt revolutionary. He celebrated my successes without jealousy. He respected my need for financial independence. He never once asked me to prove my worth by sacrificing myself. We moved in together after a year, splitting everything 50-50, maintaining separate accounts but building a shared life. It felt healthy in a way I didn't know relationships could feel. I traveled, first to Europe, solo, backpacking, through countries I'd only dreamed about while sending mortgage payments home, then to Asia with Marcus, then a photography workshop in Iceland, where I discovered a passion I'd suppressed since childhood because my parents called it impractical. My apartment filled with framed photos I'd taken, evidence of a life lived fully, visibly, unapologetically. I hosted Thanksgiving that year, not with my family of origin, but with my chosen family. Aunt Sarah, Cousin Mike, friends from the support group, colleagues who'd become confidants. We cooked together, laughed together, shared gratitude for things that mattered. Health, authenticity, freedom from toxic obligation. It was the most joyful holiday I'd ever experienced. No tension, no comparison, no wondering if I'd done enough to earn my place at the table. I was there because I wanted to be, surrounded by people who wanted me there too. 3 years in, David still made his payments, $3,000 every month, like clockwork. I heard through Aunt Sarah that he was struggling. The criminal record had cost him his corporate job, and he was working as a consultant now, making decent money but nothing like before. His house was under lien. His dating life had collapsed when women looked him up and found court records. I felt no sympathy, but I also felt no vindication. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about his suffering. It was about my liberation. He could suffer or thrive. Either way, it didn't touch me anymore. I'd built a life he wasn't part of, and that was the real victory. My parents downsized. The house they'd owned outright got refinanced to help David. And when they couldn't keep up payments, they sold it at a loss and moved into a small condo. They were finally experiencing the financial struggle they'd pretended to have for years, except now no one was sending money to bail them out. Aunt Sarah reported that they'd become somewhat ostracized in the family. The reunion revelations had spread beyond that night, and most people sided with the victims. My parents' reputation as good, loving people had been replaced with a more accurate one. Enablers of their narcissistic son, willing to sacrifice their daughter to maintain their golden child's image. Justice wasn't just the court ruling, it was this, the natural consequences of actions, the social accountability that comes when truth becomes public. They'd spent decades controlling the narrative about who I was. Now everyone knew who they were, but the real transformation wasn't in what happened to them. It was in what happened to me. I'd learned to set boundaries so firm that nothing could breach them. When flying monkeys occasionally emerged, distant relatives who hadn't been at the reunion, who didn't know the full story, I had a simple response. I'm not discussing my family. If you want details, read the court records. They're public. No justifications, no explanations, no defense of my choices. I'd spent 35 years trying to earn the right to be treated well. Now I knew I had that right inherently. Anyone who didn't see it could exit my life. I became a mentor at work, specifically focusing on young women who struggled with setting professional boundaries. I recognized the patterns, the overworking to prove worth, the inability to say no, the assumption that value came from sacrifice. I'd lived it, and I wanted to help others escape it sooner than I did. One mentee told me, "You probably don't realize it, but you saved my life." She'd been supporting her entire family financially, while they criticized her career choices. After our talks, she'd set boundaries, cut off toxic dynamics, and started living for herself. "You showed me it was possible," she said. That became my legacy. Not the sister who was exploited, but the woman who broke free and helped others do the same. The blog grew into speaking engagements at financial wellness seminars, always anonymous but increasingly impactful. I shared not just my story, but practical tools: how to recognize financial abuse, how to document evidence, how to exit exploitation without guilt. 5 years after that dinner, David made his final payment. The debt was satisfied, $350,000 returned over 60 months, plus my legal fees, and the satisfaction of knowing he'd paid, literally and figuratively, for underestimating me. I received a notification from the court that the case was closed. Marcus and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, toasting not to David's suffering, but to my survival, my thriving, my complete and total freedom from the system that tried to keep me small. A few weeks later, David sent one more email. This one I read. I know you won't respond, and I don't expect you to. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I did. The therapist my lawyer made me see has helped me see the patterns. How I was raised to believe I deserved special treatment. How I justified taking from you because I convinced myself I'd pay you back through success we'd all share. I know now that was delusional. I stole from you, I used you, I let our parents participate in that use. There's no excuse, and there's no undoing it. I'm writing this not because I think you owe me forgiveness, but because you deserve to know that you were right about all of it. I was never as good as they said I was, and you were always better than they could see. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then I archived it without responding. It wasn't my job to absolve him or validate his growth. That was between him and his therapist. My job was to keep living the life I'd built, the one where his apology, or lack thereof, couldn't touch me. Sometimes I thought about my parents, whether they ever truly grasped what they'd done, whether they missed me or just missed what I'd provided. I'd never know, and increasingly I didn't care to know. Some questions don't need answers. Some relationships don't need resolution. Some people are simply meant to be left behind. 6 years after the confrontation, I published a book. Not under my real name, but under a pseudonym, compiling years of blog posts, research, and interviews into a comprehensive guide on family financial abuse. It became a resource for therapists, lawyers, and victims, validation that what they'd experienced was real, criminal, and not their fault. The dedication read, "For everyone who was told they'd never be as good. You were always better than they could see." I thought about that dinner table sometimes, the moment I stood up, the moment I chose myself. It had felt terrifying in the moment, earth-shattering, irreversible. And it was. But it was also liberation. They had said I'd never be as good as my brother. They were right. I became better. Not because I beat him at his game, but because I stopped playing it entirely. I built my own game, my own rules, my own definition of success that had nothing to do with their approval or his achievements. Success wasn't the money I got back, though that mattered. It wasn't David's conviction, though justice felt good. It wasn't even my career advancement or my relationship or my published book, though all of those were meaningful. Success was waking up every morning in a life I'd built for myself, surrounded by people who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Success was the peace of knowing that no one could exploit me again, because I'd learned to value myself too much to allow it. Success was understanding that being underestimated by people who don't matter is just freedom to become who you're meant to be. I stood up from that dinner table 6 years ago and walked into a different life, a life where I wasn't invisible because I finally saw myself, where I wasn't inferior because I stopped accepting their definition of worth, where I wasn't trapped because I learned that family is chosen, not assigned. They chuckled and said I'd never be as good as my brother. I stood up and proved them right. I was never as good at being exploited, at accepting cruelty, at staying small. And in that, I found everything I needed. The greatest revenge wasn't his monthly payments, or their social consequences, or his criminal record. The greatest revenge was my thriving life they weren't part of, my success they couldn't claim, my happiness they couldn't diminish. I was better than David. Not because I competed with him, but because I competed with who I used to be. The invisible daughter, the human ATM, the woman who believed love required self-erasure. I won that competition every single day by choosing myself, setting boundaries, and building a life so full of genuine connection that their absence didn't leave a hole. It left space. Space I filled with authenticity, respect, reciprocity, and freedom. Space where I finally became visible, not to them, but to myself. And that was all I ever needed.